What's up, my wizards? It's Deb from SBMTG down there, YouTube.com, and yeah, this is my favorite shirt. Thanks for asking. Well, today I've got more speculation about what Kaladesh Standard is going to be like in the form of another deck tech. Last time we did aggro. This time I'm going to completely switch gears. We're going to talk about control. There's been a lot of talk about control in the upcoming standard. People are saying Grixis control might be real. People want to see a Jeskai control, and I really think Jeskai control looks really strong. And we'll get to those in due time, but today I'm going to cover sort of an iconic control deck, Esper control. Now, I've noticed a lot of newer players in my subscriber base lately. First of all, welcome to Magic, welcome to the channel, it's a fun game. Second of all, for the uninitiated, like yourselves, Esper means blue, black, and white. The three most controlling colors in Magic, and in contemporary Magic, the colors you're most likely to see in a control deck. Blue has all the counter spells and card advantage, card drawing spells. And black and white have all the good removal. And you got some pretty solid creatures between those colors too. And some good planeswalkers. Just really well-rounded colors for controlling the board and thus the game. So, do we have the tools in the current standard to make it work? I think so. Let's check it out. Normally when I do deck techs, I start with the creatures, but control decks run very few and sometimes zero creatures. Our control deck right here only runs one creature, as a matter of fact. So, I'm going to do the counterpoint to that and start with the removal and some of the disruption here, because those two elements are the cornerstone of most control decks, and this one's no different. First of all, on the disruption end of things, we're going to start with 3 Harsh Scrutiny and 2 Transgress the Mind. Harsh Scrutiny is the first of actually many cards from Kaladesh that ended up making this list. I feel like Esper Control was really helped out by Kaladesh, even though Dragon Lord or Jutai rotates, a couple of things do, but we really picked up a few good pieces from the set, and Harsh Scrutiny is honestly kind of one of the best. This is really good in the early game, especially obviously turn 1, setting up a draw for you and getting the best creature out of their hand, whether they're playing aggro, you know, get the most value-driven creature out of their hand, or against a bigger deck, these decks that are going to want to play Ulamog and Emrakul especially. I feel like you should watch out for Emrakul once this format rotates. I think she'll be serial, but you can get that right out of their hand in the very early game and help out your next draw, whether you need to draw a land drop or you need to draw, you know, removal of some kind, really can help set you up. And Transgress the Mind is also very good against those decks that want to go big on you and play Emrakul and other Eldrazi, you know, Deep Fiend and stuff. Transgress the Mind, very good against them. And, you know, good against Planeswalkers too. Good option against Planeswalkers. We need as many of those as we can get. So there's that to consider. But Transgress will also be pretty good if any silly things start to take off. You know, who knows if like Aetherworks Marvel or Panharmonicon are going to be real cards in this upcoming standard. And a lot of people are putting chips on Panharmonicon. And in that case, Transgress the Mind could be good for that reason too. Let's move to the actual removal here, though, and we'll start with the 2-mana removal. We're going to play 3 copies of Grasp of Darkness and 1 copy of Declaration and Stone. And you could play 4 copies of Grasp, but I'm doing a split here, just playing the 1 copy of Declaration for it to be a little easier to cast, honestly. We want to make black mana in this deck really bad, but I want to alleviate some of the stress of having to have 2 black by turn 2 nearly every game that we want to eliminate a creature early. So I think it's good to split with Declaration, and Declaration's also very good against tokens builds and stuff too. So I think we get a good variety and a good bit of versatility with these 2 removal cards here at 2 mana. But as far as 3 mana removal goes, we'll play 2 copies of Ruinous Path and 2 copies of Anguished Unmaking in the deck. Ruinous Path and Anguished Unmaking can both also take out Planeswalkers, just like Transgress could. So we've got a pretty good spread of options against Walkers, which I think could be pretty darned important after rotation here, especially with Chandra floating around. She's just insane. So good to have that option, and they also have the option of taking out a bunch of other stuff. And Unmaking, I should say this again, just like Transgress, I said artifacts could be a thing, and Anguished Unmaking can take those out too. So good bit of options here, and Anguished Unmaking is a little bit better now because we have a good option in Fumigate, which we'll play 3 copies of. This is our mass removal, and we'll play the other copy, the 4th copy, in the board here. But Fumigate is quite good, especially in a more or less creatureless deck here. Especially because it's going to help us reset a little bit. Not only is it going to wipe the board, obviously, but sometimes it can gain us, you know, 4 or 5 life. And against, you know, small, low to the ground or tokens builds, even more than that sometimes. So Fumigate is just very good, resets the board, and helps reset our life total too. So I really liked Fumigate. Another important part of any contemporary control deck is its Planeswalker suite. A lot of control decks play Planeswalkers nowadays because they do a lot of different stuff, and so they give you a range of options and help you control the board. So let's start with the most important planeswalkers from my point of view in this deck. We'll play 3 copies of Dovin Bane and 2 copies of Jace Unraveler of Secrets. Both of these do things that control decks really want to do. They both control creatures on the other side of the board, and they both draw cards. And the scry 1 before you draw is really awesome. Gaining 2 life and drawing a card, very good for staving off aggro in a control deck. So these are sort of no-brainer inclusions for control. But one thing I do want to bring up is how well their ultimates play together. And yes, you can get ultimates on planeswalkers, especially if you're playing control the right way. You're controlling the board, you're now, in control. That's the whole idea, right? You can ultimate planeswalkers. It's not unheard of. And when you ultimate both of these on the same board, which has happened for me in testing at least, then these ultimates are ridiculous together because they can only untap 2 things per turn when Dovin Bane ultimates, and that means most of the time it's going to be lands. But with Jace, if they go to play a spell, it's going to be countered. And unless they have 2 1-mana things, it's just they cannot play spells for the rest of the entire game. So the way these ultimates play together is ridiculous, and it's definitely worth pointing out. As far as other planeswalkers in the deck, I'm going to play 2 Liliana, Last Hope, 1 Obnixilis, and 1 Sorin. Liliana, I think, is going to be one of the most important cards in the upcoming Standard. Aggro looks to try and be an absolute beast in the upcoming Standard. It's got a couple of different options it can try, a couple of different angles it can attack from, Aggro does. And who knows what's going to be the best Aggro deck in the format, but Aggro will almost certainly have a presence. So Liliana is a very good card against those decks. And another planeswalker you can just tick up all game and end up ultimating and just taking over. We saw that at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. Many games were won just by ultimating Liliana and then sitting back on a fat stack of zombies. So Liliana very good on turn 3 against aggro, and good later on in the game when you just sort of win because you'll get exponential number of zombies and it becomes ridiculous. Obnixilis and Sorin are pretty similar planeswalkers, Both of them, again, draw cards. They both, kill creatures, but one just does it way better than the other and costs an extra mana. And again, both of their ultimates are potential game winners. So again, slam dunks for control. They destroy creatures, they draw you cards, and their ultimates can win the game. Definite inclusions. Another super duper important thing about control is obviously counter spells, which are sort of the most iconic thing about a control deck, but lately Wizards doesn't give us great counter spells. That being said, they did give us a pretty good one coming out of Kaladesh, and that's Revolutionary Rebuff. A 4 of this thing right here because we want it in the early game as much as possible. This is our replacement for Clash of Wills, honestly, and this does really better than Clash of Wills in the first few turns of the game, and this can be very relevant all the way up until turn 5 or 6, or against these decks that want to cast things like Worldbreaker, Ulamog, Imrakul. These can be important even way late into the game. So Revolutionary Rebuff, very, very good counterspell. Don't pass on it. I know it's not mana leak or anything, but for newer players, just letting you know, these kind of counterspells are usually much, much better than they look. A lot of decks are going to play creatures. Turns 2, turn 3, turn 4, they may play planeswalkers, and this can also counter planeswalkers. And that's coming to play a few times in the early game when they go to play, 3rd turn Liliana, 4th turn Gideon, whatever. This can be very, very good in those situations. So not only can it kill planeswalkers and creatures, that's the way I like to look at it. Early game, this kills things. So we want to play all 4 so that we can get copies in the early game. We're going to supplement our counterspell game with just 1 copy of Scatter to the Winds, and sometimes the ability to become a creature on this can be really important. But I just really want to play at least 1 cancel in the deck, something that's just counter target spell, just 1 counter spell. No matter what, we can counter a thing unless it just says that it can't be countered. So there are a couple of those. But just reliable, 3 mana is not too much to ask. Let's play it. The last really super important thing about control decks is how they draw cards. We want some card advantage or at least card selection in control. And we've got a couple of good pieces in the format to help us do that. First of all, we're going to play just 2 copies of Anticipate in the deck. Anticipate can be good at the end of our opponent's turn, or if we're digging for a counterspell or a removal piece in response to something our opponent does. If we're digging for a win condition to finish off the game, a counterspell to do something, control the board, maybe we're digging for a fumigate or something, Anticipate is just always a good option when we're trying to get to something we need to get to. And we're going to play one Glimmer of Genius in the deck. Glimmer of Genius I would really like to increase to 2 copies. Honestly, the card has just been very good. You know, again, when you're looking for a Fumigate, when you're looking for a removal piece of any kind, counterspell, win condition, looking for a Planeswalker, you know, whatever you are looking for, Glimmer of Genius, GOG, helps you look through it almost 4 cards, if that's what you choose to do. You know, scry 2, you don't like these, look at 2 more and put them in your hand. Basically, that's really freaking good. We don't really care that much about the energy the card gives us because the card is good enough without giving us energy. Honestly, the card is that fantastic. And I'm only going to play the 1 copy because we don't want to see it all day, but I could see playing 2 of this. Love that it's instant speed, can be played at the end of the opponent's turn or in response so that we can dig for an answer. So everything about Glimmer is really good and I am willing to pay 4 mana for it. And to finish the deck off, we've got one lonely creature in the main deck, and that's just 1 copy of Torrential Gearhulk. And there are definitely other options, and there are more options in the board. You know, I've got Kaladesh in the board, I've got Sphinx of the Final Word in the board, and Sphinx of the Final Word really could be in the main deck, especially if control is a real thing in this format, because Sphinx is good in the mirror match. But let's talk about Gearhulk. Gearhulk can flash in and counter spells. He can flash in and draw you cards off of Anticipate or Glimmer. He can flash in and remove creatures with like an Anguish Unmaking or, you know, Grasp of Darkness. Just a lot of mileage on this guy, and he's almost always got something to do by the time he comes down. And he's a pretty good win condition, big, meaty creature that can just swing and win the game in a few turns. So everything about this guy is good. And the best thing about him, at least in control, is that he can be played in response to things. He can be played at the end of their turn to make sure that we use our mana as efficiently as possible during our opponent's turn. You know, leave it up as long as you can to at least bluff a counter spell or removal spell, and then when they say go, you're like, Gearhulk lol. So, win the game. So, like, Gearhulk has been really good, and I know there are other options, but I'm sticking with my choice here. This has been fantastic in the late game, and helps you close things out with these ridiculous blowouts, you know. I'll put a huge guy on my side of the board out of nowhere on your turn, and kill your guy with an Anguish Unmaking. I'm right back in this thing, so Gearhulk has been awesome. Let's talk about the land base right here. We're playing 26 total lands because we've got to get our drops in this deck. Very important for control that it gets a land drop every turn up until at least turn 5. But in this deck, we're playing Gearhulk and Sorin, so we'd really like 6 lands on the 6th turn if we can possibly help it. So very high land count in this deck, and we're basically playing all the duels. You know, I should point out that Shambling Vent can be especially important and sometimes win you the game, but other times keep you in the game through these like 4-point life swings, you know, or if it chooses to block, that can just be fantastic too. You know, take out an attacker, at least nullify it, and gain you a couple life can really buy you some time. The Shambling Vent may be the best land in the mana base. Here's the sideboard right here, and sideboards are especially important to control decks, you know. We're really looking to fine-tune and sort of be really precise in our options when we go into Game 2 and Game 3. And we've got a lot of different ways of disrupting what I think may be important decks in the format. And I'll go ahead and point this out too while you're looking at this sideboard. Usually in the first couple of weeks of a given format, aggro will be good, and then control and mid-range will start to take over as they start to understand how to deal with aggro. I don't think this format will be any different. I don't think control is going to come out the gate and be amazing immediately. Especially not Esper. I think Jeskai has a better chance, if that's going to happen, of doing that, being a strong deck immediately. But Esper, I think, has a shot to, once it evaluates the format, really come out and do something special here, because we've got a lot of very good sideboard options. And once we figure out what to put in the main deck instead of the board and how to do this right, then the deck will be much, much better. But it definitely deserves some tuning. And that's why we've got a lot of different options in the board here. That being said, there are some cuts that I made, and the one that I'm probably most upset about is Blessed Alliance. I really want there to be a place in this deck somewhere for at least a 1 or maybe even 2 of Blessed Alliance. I like this card an awful lot, especially because it keeps you in the game in the early game and can make them sacrifice a creature. So I like an awful lot about it, and I want it to be in the deck. I just can't quite find room over what I believe to be better options. Other cuts that I made were Archangel Avacyn. In a creatureless deck, I just like, I don't need you. And then Spell Queller. I cut Spell Queller as well because a lot of our plan revolves around Fumigate in a lot of ways. You know, we Fumigate and then we go from there. You know, we set back up with Planeswalkers and start winning. So Fumigate was such a big part of our game plan, I didn't care for Spell Queller because I don't want to kill our own Queller. Simple as that. Here are your power rankings for the deck. A final score of 66, but don't let the 66 fool you, because note that we're very, very low in a couple of categories that we could not care less about. Control is above certain categories, you know. We don't care about speed, you know. You can throw everything you got at us. We're going to weather the storm, and we're going to take control of the game in, you know, turn 5, turn 6, and start turning the corner and making it our game. And once you start playing Control's game against Control, you're more or less done. And we're just trying to get to that point in the game. So we don't care about speed that much. So bring it. We don't care, you know. Same thing with synergy. You know, the cards in the deck don't have to work together that well as long as they're all strong cards that do what we need to do at each stage of the game. That's important in Control too. But here's the bad news. Altogether, the deck will cost you about $210 for the main deck and the lands, and the sideboard will add another $140 because of the stupid Liliana and the dumb Gideons, you know, and there's other stuff. Kaladesh still costs like 20 bucks, so the sideboard is still going to cost you a pretty penny. And I'm not sure Kaladesh is going to be as important. Don't quote me, but I'm not quite sure, so you might be able to save yourself 40 bucks by putting in Blessed Alliance instead, you know. So there's that. You could save money that way. But altogether, the deck comes to about 350 bucks, which is pretty steep, let's be honest. But we're playing a bunch of dual lands. We're playing Liliana, who is the real culprit here. The fact that we're playing her. We're playing a bunch of other planeswalkers, you know. We've got expensive cards in this deck. This is a competitive deck. But as far as classic Esper Control, this does have all the options you want. We got plenty of card draw. You know, we got good counter magic right now. Decent counter magic at least. Really, really good removal. A fantastic board wipe. We've got really, maybe the best planeswalkers in a 3-color combination are in Esper. So really, really do like the way the deck shapes out. I think it's a fantastic example of sort of classic Esper Control, and it's got a lot going for it. Extremely versatile and very resilient once you hit your Fumigate. And let's not forget that it's got a combo in it that can more or less lock your opponent out of the entire rest of the game as long as you've controlled the board well up to that point. So that's really, really fun when you can get that Jason Dovin Bane combo. And I know it's hard to ultimate one planeswalker, let alone two. But again, if you're playing Control right, it is more than possible. And once it does happen, laugh maniacally because the game is more or less over unless they already have a bunch of stuff they can just kill you with next turn out. If they can't kill you in like a turn or two, it's done. They may as well scoop to that combo. So that's all I've got for this Esper Control deck. I hope that it looks good to veteran players, and I hope that I helped newer players understand how Control decks are built, because they're a lot different than how sort of the basics of building other Magic decks. You know, Control decks are a different beast altogether. And in this one, I do think we have the proper tools. So vets, let me know how you felt about it. And newer players, let me know even if you would change anything. Maybe you see something I don't. It's entirely possible. It wouldn't be the first time. So let me know what you think down there in the comment section. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and sub if you're new. But don't leave yet. I know that a lot of people, when people start their YouTube spiel, they just disengage and click away. Don't do that, because I'm going to talk about what's up next. I was going to go ahead and do Jeskai Control next, but I don't think you want 2 expensive Control decks in a row. That's kind of boring, especially at the beginning of a format. What everyone's been asking me for lately in the comments section is the red-green energy deck, and I'm going to go ahead and do it. I've been working on that deck since I first saw these ridiculous red-green aggro cards getting spoiled, and I think I've got something brewed up that's really, really good, not only for a decent game, but for your wallet. It looks like a pretty budget deck right now. So, gonna bring that to you next time, and I'll be here with it. Red Green Energy Aggro, and I'll see you guys next time. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.